So is there an actual formula to scale up your DRAM frequency based on simple math? Can you just plug in some numbers into a formula? Is that for real? Or was I just clickbaiting you? Let's find out. It's clickbait. I mean, there are no hacks. Tuning and optimizing, overclocking, it's hard work, man. You make one mistake and you error in Karhu, and after 4 hours, that's not good enough. You do something else, you error after 6 hours. I mean, this video I could have put out in a half an hour if it weren't for all that shit. This stuff is not easy, okay? It takes a lot of elbow grease. There are no hacks. There are no real shortcuts. This is more like a little cheat. So I'm going to show you a little math cheat based on tRFC and tREFI, which we discussed in the last episode. How important these refresh timings are to your gaming performance. And I had that on my mind, but I wanted to bump up my DRAM frequency, and I thought maybe I can change all three at once. So I came up with a little bit of simple math that I'm going to show you. So if you take a look at this, this is where we were, this is where we left off, right? 7,800 mega transfers per second with a tRFC of 370 and a tREFI of 80,000. If I simply divide 370 by 80,000 and then take that result and multiply it by 100, I get a percentage. And that percentage is not the total amount of time the DRAM cell spends refreshing. No, that's a whole slew of more complicated formulas to figure that out. But it's simply the refresh recovery time, the percentage of the refresh interval that is the refresh recovery time. And having done the math, I know that that is 0.463%. All we're going to do is we're going to take this percentage and scale it up at the new DRAM frequency. So if I were going to bump up my DRAM frequency to 8,000 megahertz, and I gave myself a target tREFI, which was 120,000. Let's say we want to bump up our tREFI to 120,000, and we need to figure out tRFC. We've got tRFC known, which was 370 at 7,800 megahertz. Now we need tRFC new. Got a little simple math for that. Take your 370, you multiply it by the change in DRAM frequency, which I'm just going to say is 80 over 78 because we don't need all those zeros. That is 8,000 divided by 7,800. And then we take our tRFC new and divide it by our tRFC known, which is 120,000 over 8,000. That is 370 divided by, having done the math, I know that this is about 1.03, and 12 over 8, of course, is 1.5. And again, having done the math, I know this gives us 570. So at 8,000 megahertz, our new tRFC is 570. And our tREFI target is 120,000. Now, provided a couple variables, these are the prerequisites here to make this math work. My cat's got the zoomies. These are the prerequisites to make this math cheat work. Number one, When you're bumping up your DRAM frequency, the first thing you do is loosen your timings. Why? You loosen your primary timings. Why? Because you want to make sure that if you error in Karhu, it is the speed that caused it, and you just can't get any faster. You want to isolate that variable. You don't want it to be the primaries or any of the timings that cause your error in Karhu. You want to make sure that if you do error, it's because you bumped up that frequency. So the first thing you do when you tick it up, say in this case from 7,800 megahertz to 8,000, you loosen your primaries and you make sure your subtimings are stock or auto values. You're not fucking around with these just yet. You're just isolating for speed. But with this math, provided you do those two things, you can isolate for tRFC and tREFI as well. So the cell is spending a certain amount of time refreshing. Like I said, that's a complicated formula. But the percentage of its refresh recovery time relative to its refresh interval, we calculated at 4.63% at 7,800 megahertz. At 8,000, we calculated that value at 570. What is the percentage? Well, let's find that out, right? So we've got 570, which is our tRFC new, and we divide that by our tREFI new, which is 120,000. And we multiply that result by 100, and that's going to give us 0.475%. Close enough, right? Close enough to 0.463%. If you maintain that, and you've loosened your primaries, and you're running your stock subtimings, your auto subtimings, if you maintain that percentage, you're not going to error. Now, what does that do for you? That in and of itself, not too much, but you can use that formula. You can tick up your tREFI, and you can tick up your DRAM frequency. You can maintain this consistent tRFC at the new value. You will not error. And then at 8,000 megahertz, you can take this 570 and you can keep on ticking it down and down and down. Karhu pass after Karhu pass at intervals of 10 or 20 or whatever until you get a quick error, and then you know you've hit your floor. But this is a way to tick up DRAM frequency and to adjust tREFI and tRFC at the same time using that scaling. You can adjust 3 settings at once, and that's why this math can be pretty useful. We did the Maffs. Now we do the bonus Maffs. We're going to take those clock values and turn them into nanoseconds. There's a reason I want to do this, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the nature of dual data rate. But let's just take this 7,800 megahertz right now. It's actually 7,800 mega transfers per second, okay? And let's take everything we just did and convert it into nanoseconds. In order to do that, we first have to understand the difference between effective and actual clock. So here's your dual data rate, okay? It's a square waveform. All digital electronics is like this, square waveform. So here's your square waveform. It's between 0 and 1. It's not like AC with a positive and negative value, but I'm going to draw a line in between this waveform. The waveform is there, the line is not. The line is purely as an example, it's theoretical, and it's designed to represent when data is being transmitted and being recognized in this DRAM process. So these red dots represent when data is being read, and in dual data rate, data is being read at both the rising edge and the falling edge. This is a cycle, a hertz. Between that and that is a hertz. And for every hertz, there are 2 transfers. You see, that's dual data rate. Data is being read at the rising edge and the falling edge, at both edges. And that is the difference between 7,800 mega transfers per second as your effective clock and 3,900 megahertz as your actual. It's the difference between transfers and hertz. Yes? So we take our 1 second and divide it by 3,900. 3,900 megahertz. But 3,900 megahertz, mega being million, 3,900 million is 3.9 billion. 1 divided by 3.9 billion gives you 0.256 nanoseconds. Then you take that value and you multiply it by your tRFC, 0.256, which, having done the math, I know is 94.72 nanoseconds. You do the same thing with tREFI. tREFI value of 80,000. You divide that by 0.256 and you get 20,480 nanoseconds. Now, if you were to divide 94.72 by 2480 and take that result and multiply it by 100, what do you get? You get 0.4625%. The same as we got before, just using nanosecond values instead of clock cycles. And I did that so I could show you the nature of dual data rate. Helps you to understand what these transfers are and how they relate to megahertz and how your actual value is different from what they put on the package. You want to ruin my stream, baby? This is Elroy. Say hello, Elroy. This is Elroy. This is my baby, okay? You want to ruin my stream? Okay, you want to interrupt my video with your zoomies? Okay, you can say hello to the people then. You want to be a star? Be a star. I'm a star. I've got like 30 subscribers, and now so do you. Oh, God, he hates me right now. That was Elroy. Okay, so everything that I showed you there, all that Maffs, all those Maffs were real. Like, I actually did the thing, and that's the basis of the testing that we've done here on this video. So let me go ahead and show you, put it into a little bit of a slide here. So this is, I called it scenario, but in retrospect, I should have called it something different because these aren't scenarios. This is what I actually did. So scenario 1, 7,800 megahertz, tREFI 80,000, tRFC at 370, duty cycle 0.463%. This is where we started. This is where I left off in the last video. And so we move on, scaling up, using these formulas. We get up to 8,000 mega transfers per second with a tREFI of 120,000. tRFC, we started at that same percentage, same duty cycle percentage, which gave us a tRFC of 570. We just did all that math there. And that kept it loose enough, and this did not error. I think I ran this for like, 8 hours. I didn't have time to do a 24-hour Karhu because I wanted to put out a video, right? So that was scenario 2. Now, at 8,000 megahertz, and I think we continued there. Yes, we did. We lowered it. We got it all the way down to 440 tRFC value. Duty cycle only 0.367%. And I think I ran that for like 6.5 hours, Karhu. But at 8,000, remember I said tRFC, tREFI, they weren't bottlenecks. They're not bottlenecks anymore because we've ensured a consistent duty cycle percentage. But I did have a bottleneck. I did have some errors short of the 6.5 hours. But I discovered what those errors were about, and they had nothing to do with tRFC, nothing to do with the duty cycle, of course, because this math, it'll work. I mean, it worked for me. This works, and that's why I feel confident calling it a hack, you know, right? But really, it's just simple math, and you're just calculating a couple variables. But it worked. And there were other things, because we isolated those timings, there were other timings and voltages that became my bottleneck. I'm going to get into this, but you've got your fault domains. And I'm going to explain this in a sec, but the fault domains, when you're overclocking, optimizing, tuning, and you run into a Karhu error, say at an hour or half an hour or something, you can faffle around and get that stable. That's not a death sentence just because you erred in 20 minutes. You can pump it up. As a matter of fact, I erred at 8,200 and then got an 11-hour successful Karhu stress test, even after erroring at 8,200 within 9 minutes. So it's not, even if you error within 5 minutes, you can still toggle things around and mess around and get that stable. Now, how optimal that's going to be, I don't know. You got to cook to your tastes, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it will be tricky. But yes, you can stabilize that. This duty cycle formula is helpful in that regard because it helps you isolate 3 variables at a time: tREFI, tRFC, and your DRAM frequency. You can scale all of those up at the same time or scale them down as you need to. But anyway, I got at tRFC 570 is where I started keeping the duty cycle consistent. The math we just did, was able to get that down with test after test after test to 440. Carried that duty cycle up to 8,200 and other things happened. At 8,000, tRFC wasn't a problem. My new tREFI of 120,000 wasn't a problem. My signal integrity wasn't a problem. The problem was in the core logic. So we're going to get into our, I call them fault domains. Basically, when you error in Karhu, when you're overclocking and tuning, you can go to one of 3 fault domains, and you can address the problem there, one fault domain at a time. And those fault domains are core logic, signal integrity, and timings and subtimings. So 3.5, I guess, if you want to divide that fault domain into your primaries and your subtimings. So you address those fault domains, basically. That is my method, and I'm going to explain it. But what I found at 88,000 megahertz, and I used hardware info to confirm that I was actually voltage starved with my VDDQ, with my memory controller voltage, which is a core logic voltage, not a signal integrity voltage. I bumped up signal integrity because I erred, didn't do shit. I played around with timings, I messed around a little bit, didn't do nothing. I ticked up VDDQ, that is memory controller voltage, and boom, I was flying. I got a 4-hour pass, errored in like 4.5 hours. I bumped it up another 0.00625. Then it was flying at like 6. Then I pushed it up to 8 or some 10 hours. And then I got it stable. Stability for me at 8,000 megatransfers per second was all VDD2. So that's what happened at VDD2. Then we bumped it up to 8,200, keeping that same 3.7, whatever it was in the previous, that we got it all the way down to 0.367% duty cycle, kept that consistent with the math I showed you, got tRFC at 460. And this was stable in Karhu for, I think it was like 4 hours. So, you know, not too great, but not bad either. And then I was able to get an 11-hour Karhu pass later on, 8200, and this is where it was. This was at 500. So at 524. So what I did was, you see this duty cycle 0.476, that's basically where we started at 7800 mega transfers per second. Same duty cycle, same math you saw before, all the values at 7800, just scaling those up to 8200. That's where I left off. Kept that duty cycle consistent, and I didn't error, and I was like a 12-hour Karhu pass, but I couldn't stabilize the subtiming. So the bottleneck at 8000 was VDDQ. That was easy to solve, just ticked it up. My board will allow it, my cooling will allow it. At 8200, my VDDQ was already maxed out. I really couldn't push it much further. I mean, I could, but didn't really want to. And then it became the timings. And then I had a wild time. I would adjust one little timing, one subtiming, TRP or something, I can't remember, and then errored in 9 minutes, loosened that up a bit, and I was flying for 4 hours, played with another subtiming, errored in 20 minutes, loosened that one, was back at 6 hours, and blah, 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 just all, you know, it's this long walk around Harvey's barn, fucking with these subtimings at 8200 megahertz. And then by the time I got it stable, got it to like 12 hours Karhu, it was just, the subtimings were dog shit. So I was like, why am I fucking with this? And then I abandoned 8200. But I can get 8200 stable, and the math that I showed you, it works. And then here's where we ended up. Now, right now, I'm a little bit tighter than this. This is where I started. I just calculated, as it says here, the highest duty cycle yet for the purpose of adjusting primaries and subtiming. So I loosened things up wider than we had it at the start at 7800, just so that I could make sure it wouldn't error while I kept on playing with the primaries and the subtimings. So this is the last one I made a slide for, 8000 megahertz, tREFI 90,000, tRFC at 500, duty cycle 0.556%, again the highest yet, but that's scaled. We've reduced that now. I think I'm at 480 now, 100,000 tREFI. So that's it for those slides, and that kind of gives you an idea of how this formula works. As you can see, as needed, we took our duty cycle formulas, we scaled them up, and we scaled them down where we needed to. And that got us consistent. That eliminated every other variable, and I had plenty of faults. I had plenty of fucking around in the course of making this this episode, but it really wasn't with tRFC and tREFI. I loosened them and tightened them as needed, and my math allowed for that. So here at WunjoTek, we keeps it simple, yeah? Keep it simple, stupid. So you got a problem with your memory overclock, you're erroring in Karhu. What do? What do you do first? Think about things conceptually, because that's how we think about things here at WunjoTek. We think high level, we think concept. We're not about plugging numbers in. So conceptually, how do you navigate this Karhu error? Well, here's what I do. Here are these 3 fault domains. That's what I call them. Signal integrity, core logic, timings. And when we talk about signal integrity, we mean what we say, the integrity of these signals as we go from one component to another across the system. Okay? Their IMC has to communicate with the DRAM, and it does so through the traces on the motherboard. How clean that signal is has everything to do with the board. And if you got a 2-DIM board, an enthusiast board like I do, it makes this shit a lot easier. With a 2-DIMM board, you've got many, many, many advantages. So more slots, especially if they're all populated, means a heavier workload for the controller, for the IMC. Each DIMM slot is connected to the CPU via traces, electrical traces like lanes connecting neighborhoods in a city. And the more slots you add, the longer and more complex the traces become. So 4-DIMM boards require longer, more convoluted routing to support these extra slots. So there's been a lot in it, sort of this space lately about Intel and AMD, and I don't want to go into it too much. I mean, it's like I always say, you cook to your taste, and what works for you might not work for me, and so on and so forth. But when you take a 14900K and stick it in a 4-DIMM board, you are fucking crippling it. Okay, and all the benchmarks after that don't matter. Now, I know it's a pain in the ass. I know the only way you can get an affordable 2-DIMM board is to make it an ITX board. And maybe you don't want to build ITX, okay? If you want a 2-DIMM enthusiast board, you shell out a shitload of money like I did, and that's what gets your 14900K humming. And I know people don't want to spend that money, and they don't want to tune, and they don't want to do shit like that. I don't know. What can I say? You guys are not my target audience. But most of these benchmarks that compare these two products are simply crippling the 14900K. Now, when I say that, people are going to say I'm shitting on AMD, and they're going to be mad at me or whatever. People are so reactionary. Look, it's like I say, you cook to your taste. I'm not shitting on it. The CPU is just a product, okay? My 14900K is just a product. I mean, imagine getting bent out of shape about a product. I mean, these are toys that we have fun with, okay? So I don't care what you run, and it's no big hassle for me. It's to overclock and tune either. I mean, I like it, and that's why I got this chip. But in any event, you have to pair components wisely, and because I chose the right board for a 14900K, I didn't have to faff around with signal integrity voltages. Now, when I went to 8,000 megahertz, right, I did my first pass at 8,000 megahertz, right? And I got some errors in Karhu, like you do. I went to signal integrity first. I ticked it up, didn't do shit. Fault domain eliminated, right? So, if I didn't have, if ticking up CPU VDDQ didn't do anything, then why would I need to mess around with DRAM VDDQ? You can just cut out that entire fault domain. Move to core logic, ticked up VDD2 or memory controller voltage, and boom, I'm humming. Passing Karhu tests, no problem. You see? So I found my fault domain. When I ticked it up to 8200, my subtimings became my bottleneck, because we had already maxed out VDD2. I ticked up signal integrity a little bit. So just to give me a little bit of headroom, but then something quite interesting happened. I abandoned 8200 because my timings were dog shit, and I said, it ain't really worth the hassle. Went back to 8000, got an error, and I think it was like 3.5 hours, and I had a hunch. Because I had never had any problems with the signal integrity voltages during this overclocking episode that constitutes the material of this video. And then I thought, well, why did I do that? Why did I tick up VDDQ? Maybe I made a mistake. In fact, I'm pretty sure I made a mistake. So at that point, I was messing with the timings. So I decided to tighten my timings. I tightened my primaries, tightened a couple of my subtimings, and then I ticked down VDDQ. and I passed my Karhu test. So what happened? Overshoot. I was throwing too much voltage into those I/O data lines. There was no need for me to have ticked up VDDQ. Again, my board Z790 Apex Encore is, my hero here. Okay, don't get the hero board. This is the board. Yeah. Okay, so in any event, that's how you kind of negotiate these 3 fault domains. The next one I want to talk about is timings. So I came up with a little analogy to explain the timings. And this is just basic, just primer stuff. But again, it's high level, and it's a way to simply understand these timings and what they do. And what I'm trying to do is provide a picture of not just what they do, but how they interact with each other. So picture a car on a road, and ahead of that car is a cement truck. And the car in this analogy is a read operation. The cement truck is a write operation. The cement truck is resurfacing the road, which is what happens on the row when you write data to it. You can think of it as resurfacing a road, yeah? So there are lots of streets being resurfaced, and how many streets are being resurfaced is represented by our old friend tREFI, and how long each resurfacing takes is tRFC, your row refresh cycle time. Now the car has to wait for the street to dry. That's TWR, write recovery, because the cement truck is writing the data and the car has to wait for the road to dry. That's TWR. Once it's dried, the car can get onto the road and start driving, and we call that write to read turnaround, TWTR. And I'm going to go over these. The traffic light signal, when the car can get out onto the main street, that is to the row, TRRD, row to road delay. That's the traffic light, yeah? Now, however many main streets, main drags open up, that car can only travel on one of 4 of those main streets. And that's your TFAW, 4 activate window. So the car spends a while waiting at the green light, TCL. So that's your cast latency, your principal primary timing. That's where between the row being active and the data becoming accessible, your TCL, cast latency. Car gets off the main street onto a side street, so it's traveling along that row. Remember the drawing that we made with the closed transistor? The row was blue and the columns were green in the last video. It's basically getting off at the column. So you get off the main street onto the side street. RAS to CAS delay. Row access strobe to column access strobe. TRCD, RAS to CAS delay. You can't speed too fast through the neighborhood. All right? You got to slow down in the neighborhood. TRAS, right? Because all these operations have to happen within a certain window. We call that TRAS, the row active strobe. So after the car's driving through the neighborhood, side street, after he gets through, he and all the other cars get through that neighborhood, then that side street has to be shut down again for resurfacing. That's when they close the row. TRP. RAS pre-charge time. Closing a row means to pre-charge the row. That's what closing a row means, and we know what a pre-charge is. It's when we pre-charge that bit line to 0.5 volts. So you had to get through the neighborhood before that happens. TRTP, what is that? That's read to pre-charge time. But when the car has nothing but green lights ahead of him and he can access any neighborhood, yeah, any column, yeah, you could say. Nothing but green lights ahead, smooth sailing within that row, access any column, that is neighborhood, off the main drag, that is row. We call that TCCD, column to column delay. I got these written down. See if I can open up this slideshow here. Let's just go over these so you can see them, and then their function within this little city traffic analogy. TCL casts latency. That's you waiting for the green light, right? That's, as I said, the gap between the activation of the row and being able to access the data on that row. That's your read latency. Together with tRCD, that is your theoretical read latency, notwithstanding bursts and so forth. tRCD being RAS to CAS delay. That's when you get off the main street. That's when you wait between the row activation and the subsequent read-write command. That delays tRCD. TRP, RAS pre-charge time. That's when you close down the side street. You shut down one row before you can open another. Everything happens in order here in DRAM. So that helps out when the requested data is in a different row than the one currently open. Get this little RAS pre-charge time. TRAS, again, row active strobe. We call that the speed limit in this analogy. Time between when the row is activated and when the row closes. Now, we got a little bit of math here, and it's kind of interesting, this one, because these timings, you could say, are independent of each other, right? But there are some little formulas, like take, say, TRAS. In theory, what are we talking about? Read to pre-charge time, so tRTP, and tRCD is when the act command, the row is activated to the subsequent command. So tRCD plus tRTP should give you your TRAS, and you can in fact add those numbers, and that can be the number that you plug in for your TRAS value when you're overclocking, if you want to. There's other ways you can calculate it, and in many ways other values can take up that workload more so than TRAS can, but whatever. So but if you wanted to, you could just take tRCD and tRTP, add them together, and get your TRAS. TRAS, speed limit, row activation, row closure, time between those two. tRTP, read to pre-charge. And in the analogy, this is the time before the street shuts down. This is the delay between the read and the subsequent pre-charge. So together with tRCD, that should be the read time, total read duty. tREFI, we know all about. tRFC, we know all about. TWR, write recovery, that's the cement drying, right? Because the cement truck is attaching that data. It's resurfacing the road so that the data remains on the row, right? And unless we want the read on top of the write, we've got to let that data set. We've got to let the road, the pavement dry before you can read the data. Yes? So that's your write recovery. And then you have your write to read turnaround. That's when you can drive after the write. So data set, road, pavement is dry, and we've observed this delay, and now you can drive after the write. How long do you have after the write to get driving? So this is what actually tells the controller to disengage the write driver before engaging the read driver. Write to read delay, TWRRD. We can look at this as the distance between the car and the cement truck. So it says to the controller, hold up, don't issue the read just yet. Gives you a little bit of spacing there. TRRD, row to row delay. So we call this how long the traffic light is. Basically, this is the minimum delay between activating two different rows. And those two different rows can be both within one bank group and across different bank groups. So that's that minimum delay, TRRD. TFAW, the 4 activate window, 4 streets open at a time. That's it. 4 rows. That's it. Column to column delay. This is these crossing these intersections. Like if the delay is short there, then our little car is seeing nothing but green lights and can access any column within that row. It's the spacing between the read-write bursts. So there you have it. That is a review of basic timing and the basic timings. Very, very simple, very, very high level with a kind of a simple analogy. And, I know it seems really simple. It seems, kind of like childish, like somebody who is teaching you this in middle school might teach it. But sometimes that can be a good starting place to get more granular and to learn more about how to adjust these timings. It can teach you a little bit with the city traffic analogy. It can teach you a little bit about the interoperability of these timings, how one works with the other, and what kind of a intricate operation these DRAM timings are. And honestly, it's, even though it just seems so, I don't know, so middle schoolish, it's actually more than a lot of people know. It's more than almost anyone knows. And in fact, it gives you all the knowledge you need to be able to watch a Buildzoid video and know what the fuck he's talking about, instead of just being soothed to sleep by his oddly comforting yet nerdy voice. I know I'm not alone. So we did a whole hell of a lot here, didn't we? So first of all, we did some simple math, some simple maths. We calculated a formula for scaling up DRAM frequency based around a desired tREFI value and a known tRFC value, calculating the new tRFC, keeping the duty cycles consistent as a baseline for ticking up DRAM even further. We ticked it up from 7,800 to 8,000 to 8,200, back to 8,000. We talked about our fault domains, where we go and how to solve problems when we error in Karhu, and how to address these fault domains. We went into a little bit of detail about the timings, primaries and subtimings. I want to talk about what I meant when I said high level, because I think this might confuse some people. It might sound like I'm bragging. Oh yeah, high level thinking. No. It means something different. You have to understand, I spent 7 years as an accountant, and we used to talk about this type of thing all the time. We used to use this concept all the time, high level. What it actually means is you're looking at an issue from a great height. So you're understanding all of its interplays, you're seeing all the comings and goings, but you're not looking at the granular detail until you want to. But you understand things from a high level, that is, you understand them conceptually before you start getting into the nitty gritty. And if you've seen the videos, you see that that's the way I think. And that's the kind of thinking I'm trying to foster on this channel, because that's how I've learned this stuff. But it's time to put my money where my mouth is. I have in my hot little hands here a, what the fuck is this? B150M Mortar Arctic. old MSI board with some sort of Intel chip on it. Can't remember which one, but it's a K series, so I can overclock it. We're going to take these principles that I learned and apply it to this old hardware that my buddy at work loaned me. And so when these high-level concepts, we are applying them in granular detail. We are applying them on this very, very maxed out system with these enthusiast parts and an enthusiast board, and we are going to apply them in a granular way on some old hardware and see if we can get that pumping and run Cyberpunk or some shit on it. So stay tuned to the channel if you want to see me try to put my money where my mouth is. Also, I'm not going to neglect the AMD bros. Dude, I got you. My buddy's building an AMD system. You have to understand, I don't have all the money in the world, right? Shelled out a lot on this, but I'll get this equipment when I can get this equipment. And so I've got plans to get my hands on an AMD system. My buddy's going to let me tune that up for him, and I'm doing that for him just for channel content. So AMD bros, I got you. Don't worry about it. I love to. Much love for you too. All right. Don't put me in the middle of any of that shit. Anyway, nothing but love here at WunjoTek. And so stay tuned if you're interested in that content. We are building a community here. I know it's small right now, but it's going to be, we're going to be sharp as eagles and wise as owls. Okay, we're going to understand this hardware and we're going to have fun with it. We're going to have fun with our hobby. We're going to spread the joy of tech, but we are going to also build an intelligent and circumspect community here that doesn't talk out of its ass. We are going to put our money where our mouths are. We are going to test this shit ourselves, and we're going to have a lot of fun. If you are interested in that vision of a positive community free of rancor or fanboyism in this tech space, then please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you around.